Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this QEEE lecture on this soil exploration. So this is the second lecture. We welcome you in this afternoon. So last class on 8th, whatever we discussed, we'll just have a review and recap of that, and then we'll continue with the other topics. Okay. So first what we discussed in the importance of investigation. So as you understood that in civil engineering each project is unique and previous experience sometimes helps, sometimes may not. Okay. So because of the uniqueness and the complex geology and the material characteristics, you need to have a rigorous investigation. And the other aspect is the structural loads these days are huge, they are architecturally complex, and ground is very unpredictable. So you need to have a proper investigation, and also we just highlighted various aspects of failure which we have seen because of improper investigation. So we understood that the cost of failure is too high if proper investigation is not done. Now we already mentioned that there are three important aspects which are part of the site investigation. One is site exploration, the laboratory testing, and in situ testing. So you need to acquire sufficient information before you go for the design. So both in terms of the quality of soil, the type of strata, and the any specific situation or any specific complications if ground is having, that need to be identified. Now we also discuss various principal objects which were part of this site investigation, that is the sequence, thickness, and lateral extent of the soil strata, then the representative sample which we get from the strata, then the groundwater condition. These three aspects is very crucial for a complete site investigation: the strata thickness, the representative sample, and the groundwater details. So there are four main components which has to be followed during a site investigation, which I already discussed last, just I am having a recap of that. So now you know what exactly these four are. The desk study, the first thing is the desk study, where you gather all the information, various maps, various details, information of the site, in and around site. So those existing information we just go through and we call that desk study. Then we have a preliminary investigation and we call that site reconnaissance walkover survey. This is a preliminary survey which we do initially, and then the rigorous ground investigation followed by a geotechnical report. These are the four aspects, four components of any site investigation. Now as I already highlighted, there is no straightforward or hard and fast rule to the depth and number of boring. That has to be decided based on the structure, based on the strata, based on the cost involved. So various aspects are part of this investigation and taking decision while choosing number and depth of boreholes. In general, boring should be located to obtain maximum information with minimum number of boreholes. So we always look for optimize the number of boreholes and optimize the depth. Sometimes you need not to have all boreholes to equal depth. Some particular borehole you can go deeper and then assess the strata. So that way you can save some of the cost involved in investigation. Then we already covered this soil boring techniques. We discussed about auger boring, we discussed about vast boring, percussion drilling and rotary drilling. So that last lecture notes, if you can refer, you will be able to get all the information. Then we also discussed about disturbed and undisturbed sample. As you know, disturbed samples, which are if the structure get disturbed during the sampling process, we call the disturbed sample, and if the structure is preserved, then we call undisturbed. With little precaution, we can preserve the water content and the ratio of mineral compositions. With that, if you can maintain, with this called a representative sample. So various applications we can use this representative sample in place of undisturbed sample, which is little difficult to get. But some of the tests, some of the specific tests need undisturbed sample. For example, shear strength, we need to have a direct shear test. So last class we just highlighted some of the tests which has to be done in undisturbed sample. So sampling plays a very important role as far as site investigation concerned. So this disturbed and undisturbed sample again depends on the type of strata. For example, if you are having a very sandy soil or granular soil, it's sometimes difficult to get a undisturbed sample. So definitely a field test will be a better option in that case. Now we also mentioned the degree of disturbance, which is related with the disturbance, disturbed or undisturbed sample, how you can decide which is undisturbed, which is disturbed. So to this class we will also just tell you how to calculate the degree of disturbance, so that you can decide the sample whether that is disturbed or undisturbed. Now we already discussed some of the in situ tests which we regularly carry out for this site investigation. So in that we discussed standard penetration test, that is SPT, the most versatile and most commonly used technique. Then we discussed the static cone penetration test, the seismic cone penetration test, and dynamic cone penetration test. So this test we already discussed last class. We'll just have a quick review of what we discussed. Then we'll subsequently follow the other test like pressure meter test, field vane shear test, plate load test, and geophysical test. So today we'll be covering this 3 pressure meter test, field vane shear test, and plate load test. The geophysical test tomorrow, the first 1 hour we'll discuss, and then we'll have discussion on various related questions with a small quiz, which will give you little more confidence on these topics. Okay. So today mostly we'll focus on pressure meter test, vane shear test, and plate load test. Before we go to that, we'll just have a quick recap what we learnt about the other test, like standard penetration test, that is SPT, CPT, SCPT, and DCPT. Now just as we discussed the standard penetration test, now I hope you understood what exactly this standard penetration test. It is a, as the name implies, it's just a penetration of a sampler with a hammer of 65 kg and a fall of 750 millimeter. So with that there will be some penetration of the sampler to the soil. So the number of blows corresponding to the 300 millimeter penetration is recorded, leaving 150 millimeter top soil. Okay. So it can be done at different strata as you go with the boring. So as the strata changes, we have to do the SPT to get the required number. So as this test shows, it's a very simple test, easy to carry out. Most of the contractors are comfortable with this test, but at the same time there are issues like if the strata is changing frequently, it would be really difficult to do the test faster, because at each strata or each change in the strata you have to do at, or maybe regular interval of 1.5 meter or 2 meter you have to do. Especially when you have a very deep borehole, then it's really difficult to, or it's a time taking to have SPT. Okay. So definitely a more automated version, that is the CPT, that cone penetration test, would be really helpful, because there you need not to record manually, rather automatically you can get the tip resistance and the slip friction. Now there, as I discussed in SPT, we had some kind of corrections, because these numbers are crude and depends on the various overburden or the type of soil. So obviously there is a need to have some corrections. So there are hammer energy corrections, then we have overburden correction, dilatancy correction. We discussed that last class, and today we will just have a small example how to calculate this correction, how to do these corrections. Now, as I was discussing on this cone penetration test, the picture we already discussed. As you can see, it is a cone, small cone, which will be vehicle mounted and then continuously will be penetrated. So as it goes down, it continuously records the strata details with the help of load cells. That will be the tip resistance and the slip friction. Then the ratio will tell you what if whether the strata is clay or sand. So we discussed last class. So that ratio is basically called friction ratio. That is the ratio of skin friction divided by the tip resistance. So the slip friction which is recorded is basically the skin friction, and then the tip, just beside the cone, behind the cone there will be a load cell which will record the tip resistance as it get penetrated. So high ratios generally indicate clay material, while the lower ratios are typical sandish materials. Okay. So usual value of CPT, this skin friction to tip resistance ratios are 1 to 10% for clay, and sands are generally identified by exhibiting a ratio of less than 1%. Now, as I discussed, CPT is an automated version of penetration test with all instrumentation, where you get directly the strata details. But if you add some additional instruments or additional measurement sensors, then it will make the CPT much more versatile. For example, if you add pore pressure transducers or pore pressure measurement is if included with the CPT, it becomes CPTU, that is cone penetration test with pore pressure transducer. So we also call that as piezo cone. Piezo cones also measure in situ pore pressure, as I already discussed. So both in static and transient conditions, and this pore pressure will help us to differentiate the strata or classify the strata. Sometimes CPT also fitted with temperature sensors, and this is very useful to find the precise position of zone of saturation. So obviously the temperature sensors, if added, it will be much more versatile. Now this SCPT, which is much more advanced version, where you also include the shear wave velocity measurement with some seismic sensors. So it directly measures the shear wave velocity, and the same CPT becomes SCPT, that is seismic cone penetration test. So this is helpful to know whether the strata is liquefiable or not, or whether how the response of the ground in case of earthquake. So this SCPT also being used these days for site investigation. This particular figure we already discussed is a typical figure which gives you the tip resistance, the slip friction, the pore pressure and the shear wave velocity with depth. As you see, the different depth, as the depth increases, you have different values of tip resistance. Similarly, for slip friction also varies with the depth, pore pressure also varies, and then zero velocity profile also changes with the depth. So these informations are very useful to characterize the ground. Now we also discussed the DCPT, which is the in between the CPT and SPT, and mostly is the smaller version of SPT, which and with a continuous cone penetration with a hammer. So it gives continuous information unlike SPT, and becomes more useful especially for highway applications, okay, or where dynamic loadings are prominent. Now just look at a small example which is related to the degree of disturbance, so that you can tell which is the sample is disturbed or not. So you already may be familiar with this particular, just look at this particular the area ratio which we discussed last class to calculate the disturbance of a sample, that is d naught square minus di square, that is the outside diameter of the sample tube, and this is the inside diameter of the sample tube, di divided by the di square. So that is the area ratio into 100, that will give you in percentage. So there are two ways to take out the sample, one with split spoon sampler as I discussed, another is Selby tube. If you consider the split spoon sampler, the dimension will be, the typical dimension will be 35 and 50 millimeter, 50.8 millimeter. So if you calculate the area ratio with this equation, you will find that the disturbance is, degree of disturbance is 110%. That's a very large disturbance, that means we get. On the other hand, if you consider the Selby tube, you will get a disturbance where the di inside diameter is 47.6 and outside diameter is 50.8. You get a area ratio of just 13.8%. That is close to 10%, which is prescribed for to tell a sample is undisturbed. Although the sample has to be within the 10%, the disturbance should be within 10% ratio, the area ratio should be, but even with up to 20% we can consider for reasonably less disturbance and use for our regular lab test. Okay. So definitely, as you can see, if you want to have a undisturbed sample, you have to go by some Selby tube sampler. The other example related to the correction for overburden and dilatancy. So there is a small example which is given in Gopal Ranjan and Rao book. So suppose this is the problem, a fill n value in a deposit if fully submerged fine sand was 40 at a depth of 6 meter. The average saturated unit weight of the soil is 10 kilonewton per meter cube. Calculate the corrected n value. So as you can see here in this particular, the n value is given, that is 40, depth is given 6 meter, and the saturated unit weight of the soil is 10. Sorry, this is I think 19. Okay. So saturated unit weight is 19, by mistake there is a typo mistake. So 19. So calculate the corrected n value. Now as you can see, we need to get, for the overburden correction, you need to get the overburden pressure. The overburden pressure, if you want to calculate, that means you have to have unit weight of the soil which is saturated. So what unit weight you consider? In a case of saturated, you consider submerged unit weight, that is saturated unit weight minus unit weight of water. Why use that submerged unit weight? Because there is a buoyancy factor which acts when it's saturated. So that need to be subtracted, and the value of submerged unit weight becomes 9.2. Then the effective overburden pressure can be calculated, that is the unit weight, the submerged unit weight, and the height of the that is the overburden, the thickness, the deposit thickness, which is 6 meter. So as you can see here, it is 55.2 kilonewton per meter square, the overburden pressure. Now, so if you remember last class, we discussed the overburden pressure. To calculate overburden pressure, the correction for the overburden pressure, Cn equal to 0.77 log 10 2000 divided by P dash, that is the effective overburden pressure. So we already calculated effective overburden pressure, that is 55.2, and then we can calculate it, the Cn 0.77 into log 2000 divided by 55.2, that is 1.2. So the correction factor for the overburden pressure is basically 1.2. Now the original value of N was 40, so corrected value becomes 48, that is Cn into N, that is 1.2 into 40, that is 48. Now this is for the overburden correction. The next what you have to include is the dilatancy correction. As you see here, it's submerged and dense sand, so you have to have dilatancy correction as well. So if you remember the equation for the dilatancy correction, that is N double dash is equal to 15 plus 0.5 N dash minus 15. So N dash is corrected over the corrected N value for the overburden correction. So 15 plus 0.5, if you substitute N dash with 48, so you will get a 31.5. So roughly you can consider it 31. The N double dash is approximately 31 for this after correction, both the overburden as well as dilatancy. So this is the corrected SPT number which has to be used. So hope you understood both the disturbance related the disturbance ratio, like the ratio of disturbance for sample, as well as the overburden and dilatancy correction for SPT number. Okay. Now we also discussed some different correlations which are related with SPT and QC. Okay. So with SPT, if you see, there are various correlations with phi which has to be used, because directly N is a good number that has to be correlated with various other geotechnical parameters, especially the shear strength parameter for the design. So in this particular case, if you see this for cohesionless soil, for different N, as you can see here, different phi is given. So if N is less than 4, you get a phi of 25 to 30, and if it is more than 50, we will get 38 to 43. As you can see, as N increases, phi also increases, and obviously N is also related with the relative density. Okay. So for cohesionless cell, the description is corresponding to different relative density. We have very loose to very dense. Okay. So that's why you can use this SPT number to correlate with phi relative density. Okay. And then we also use some kind of correlations which are related with phi. And so if you know the relative density, you can calculate the phi for 50 when the first equation, which when you have more than 5% fines. If it is less than 5% fines, then you can use the bottom equation. So that way you can, there are many other correlations are available, which last class I discussed. So these are usually used for various design purposes. In case of cohesive soil, you have to use the consistency, like from very soft to hard, the corresponding to different, and you have compressive strength, like when less than 2, you have less than 0.25 kg per centimeter square, and we have N more than 32, then we have more than 4 kg per centimeter square. So as you can see, as the strength, the compressive strength is increased, the N value also increase. So from very soft to very hard, you have N value varies from 2 to even less than 2 to 32, more than 32. Okay. So this is corresponding to cohesive soil. Similarly, for CPT data also can be used for various geotechnical purposes, geotechnical designs. So for sandy gravels and gravels, the ratio of QC by N, as you can see here, 8 to 10. Then we have coarse sands, the QC by N ratio 5 to 10. Then we have clean, fine to medium sands and slightly silty sands, we have 3 to 4. And for silty sandy silt and slightly cohesive silt, we have 2. So this ratio is useful to link the QC and N. Mehrap also given some correlation with QC and N. So that can be used. So QC in when taken in MPa equal to 0.4 into N. N is the PT number. So this can be correlated. So as you can see now the SPT numbers or CPT number, these numbers can easily be correlated with various soil properties. Once you know from the QC, once you know the N, you can directly use with the other tables, like for example calculation of phi or modulus, etc. you can find out. Now CPT data also used for the design of foundations, granular soils. For example, here one equation is given, QC is equal to NK Cu plus sigma 0, okay, where sigma 0 is the total overburden pressure, Nk is the cone factor. So CPT, there is a cone factor that has to be considered to calculate the QC. So for different clay type, you have different cone factors. For normally consolidated clay, you have Nk from 11 to 19, and for over consolidated clay, you may get values from 12 to 20. On average, we can use a cone factor of 20, mostly for clays. So with that, you can calculate the QC and design your geotechnical structures. Okay. So with this, just I covered the various SPT and CPT related test details. Now we'll also discuss on some modulus parameters. Before I go into the next section, just I want to know whether you have any doubt with the SPT or CPT or any other exploration related this topic discussed. If you have any questions, you can just pass on to us so that I can discuss. Tomorrow we'll have a dedicated session for the question answers only, and then a small quiz. Okay, so we'll continue with the next topic, that is related to modulus parameter. So now you know what are the various field tests we do in site investigation. So SPT, CPT, SCPT and DCPT, those tests we already discussed. Now we'll focus on some other test. Coming to the modulus, which is the one of the most important parameter for the design, especially for the foundations. Now you all know in laboratory how to get the modulus, but if you want to calculate the modulus in the field, how you go about that? So today we'll discuss some test methods which can tell you how to get the modulus of a soil or some weak rock. Okay, so this test called pressure meter test. Many of you might have already heard this. The pressure meter test, which was first developed by Louis Menard from France, 1955, and it mostly finds out the at rest horizontal earth pressure and the modulus. Test is very useful for various applications like bearing capacity of shallow foundations and deep foundations, settlement of all type of foundations. Then we have deformations of laterally loaded piles and seat piles. Then we also use this pressure meter test for resistance to resistance of anchors. Like many times in soil, we use anchors, so that resistance to anchors also can be find out using pressure meter test. So what is this test all about? This pressure meter test is mostly a kind of stress strain characteristics of soil in the in situ. Okay. So what you do in case of laboratory, you apply some load on a specimen and then you get a stress strain characteristics. So you apply load first and then you measure the deformation. So look from load deformation, you actually calculate the stress strain characteristics. Similarly, in the field, if you want to do or you want to get the load deformation characteristics, you can apply pressure to a borehole and get the pressure volume characteristics, like change in the volume of the borehole and corresponding pressure. The pressure volume characteristics is indirectly related with the stress strain characteristics and can be can be used to find out the modulus of the soil. Now this test is basically done by applying pressure to the side walls of a borehole. That means essentially you need a borehole for this particular pressure meter test. There will be two units. One is readout units, which will be at the surface. Another is the probe, which will be inserted in the ground, which will be used to apply pressure to the borehole wall. So that once the probe is at the test depth, like for example your foundation depth is 10 meters, so you have to have a borehole up to that and then your probe has to be inserted up to that depth. The guard cell are inflated to brace the probe in place. So once you put your probe up to the test depth, the guard cell are inflated to brace the probe in place. Okay. So first thing what you do, you apply pressure to change the borehole has to be sent to its original place by applying pressure. So SVEC college, your question is samples, which type of samples, which samplers will be using to get soil samples. For underwater, what type of sampler can? See, underwater or so on shore, the things may not change as far as sampling is concerned. Okay, you can use the sampler as far as collecting samples are concerned. Okay, depends on what type of test you want to perform. Okay, so underwater, obviously, sometimes if difficult to get the samples, it's better to go by some kind of vane shear test, which I'll discuss today. So that is an in situ test of shear strength. So that way we need not to worry about getting a undisturbed sample from the below water. Okay. So obviously sampler, if penetrated at a deeper depth, you will get the right quantity of right amount of sample with the sampler. So we'll continue what we are discussing, that is the pressure meter test. So as we were discussing, this pressure meter test is having two units. One is the control unit, that is the readout unit. The other is the probe unit. So probe unit is basically inserted into the borehole and then inflated to exert pressure to the borehole wall. Now the measuring cell is pressurized with water, inflating its flexible rubber bladder. So probe will have a flexible rubber bladder which exerts a pressure on the borehole wall. As the pressure in the measuring cell increases, the borehole wall deforms. So if the soil wall is exerted pressure with the probe, it will deform. The pressure within the measuring cell is held constant for approximately 60 seconds and the increase in volume is maintained. The constant pressure is recorded. Okay. So you need to keep the pressure constant for some time so that the deformation settles. So you apply pressure and then it takes time to deform. So you need to have some time you should allow some time to soil to deform. So once the required time is passed, you can record the amount of pressure and the volume. The pictures shows that typical probe unit, how it looks. There will be a rubber membrane, a probe unit, which will be inserted into the borehole, and then we have a control unit. We can see various kind of gauges, which will some are guard cell pressures. Then we have unit to find out how much volume is volume of water is entered in the probe. Okay, so this will give you full control of what is happening deep inside. This is another picture of the same test. As you can see here, the control unit, we have pressure gauges, as I already. Then we have, you need some gas to apply some kind of to apply pressure, and which through water only. You have to apply gas pressure on the water column, and then correspondingly the pressure will be exerted on the probe, on the borehole wall. Then here, as you see, this probe will have guard cells. So guard cell actually fixes this, basically it isolates this borehole for a particular zone with a particular portion. So once you isolate the borehole with this packer units or the guard cells, you can inflate this zone and with pressure, applying pressure, and you get a pressure volume characteristics like this, which is shown in this figure. So we have guard cells, we have measuring cell. After fixing the guard cell, we can apply pressure through measuring cell. As this measuring cell applies pressure to this borehole wall, it inflates and you get a pressure volume characteristics like a S type of curve. So here, as you can see, this curve, we have three zones: zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. The first zone is basically the initial pressure which is required to send the borehole to its original position. What exactly happens in case of soil? With the moment you make the borehole, the borehole walls start collapsing slowly. So there will be some kind of deformation already happened. Now, unless until you apply some pressure, it won't go back to its original position. So the initial position you have to send by applying some volume or pressure. So once you apply the pressure, that is the P0 is basically the initial condition of the borehole. Then you continue your pressure, correspondingly volume of water also will increase. So the zone 2 is basically the pseudoelastic zone. So here the stress is nearly proportional to the strain, and after that you get a shear failure of the borehole wall. So you continuously increase the pressure, and at the end you will get a failure of the borehole wall. So you get a complete characteristics with zone 1, zone 2 and zone 3. So what I just highlighted is zone 1, which indicates the process of pushing the sides of the borehole back to their position before boring was made. Then zone 2 is considered as the pseudoelastic phase of soil. That means you have stress is almost linear with the strain, or the pressure is linear with the volume. The zone 3 is the plastic phase, where it failed, the plastic phase of the soil deformation. The asymptotic, as you can see here, becomes asymptotic. So that asymptotic value of the pressure is known as the limit pressure. So that is the limiting pressure for the test. That means soil cannot take beyond this. Now, if you see this particular equation, which is the pressure meter equation for the pressure meter modulus, there is an initial volume which is there already. Like when you have inserted the probe will have an initial volume that has to be filled with water. So that initial volume, after that some volume will come which is required to send the ball to its original position. After that Vf, and then the next is the plastic the limiting phase. So as you can see, our concerned pressure and volume is this zone, from where you will get the pressure meter modulus. So here as you see, mu s can be used, the Poisson's ratio mostly 0.33. Then V0 you are aware, we know. Vm also, small vm also we can find out using from this, and then we have delta P by delta V. So delta P, that is the change in pressure from this point to this point, and delta V from this point to this point. So both delta P and delta V we can calculate. So using this equation we can find out what is the pressure meter modulus of the soil with the pressure meter test. Now this is pressure meter modulus, which is given by from the test. To convert that into the soil modulus, we have some correlations. For example, in this here you can see E is related with EP, the pressure meter modulus, with alpha. EP by alpha is the elastic modulus, and EP is the pressure meter modulus divided by alpha. Alpha is a rheological factor, mostly depends on the soil type, and the ratio of EP by PL, that is the limiting pressure, and sigma H, the horizontal pressure, horizontal earth pressure. So now as you can see here, for different soil type you have corresponding alphas are given. For clay, normally consolidated clay 0.67, for silt, normally consolidated silt 0.5, then we have for sand 0.33. So different alpha will give a different modulus corresponding to particular value of EP. Okay. So we will get the modulus of soil with this pressure meter test. So obviously this particular pressure meter test, which is very useful to find out this modulus of soil, and subsequently can be used for various designs, foundation design, other applications which I discussed already. Okay. For weak rock or with softer rock also can be used this particular pressure meter test, because there is a limit by which beyond which we cannot apply pressure to deform the ground. So for softer grounds like soil and some soft rocks, we can use this particular pressure meter test, and we can find out the modulus. Advantage with this pressure meter test is we can go to a deeper depth. Okay, larger depth also we can go and find out the pressure meter modulus and soil modulus. In case of especially the deep foundations or various foundation at deeper depth, or modulus at particular very deep, if you want to know, obviously pressure meter will be very useful. Now coming to the other method, which is plate load test. The plate load test is a semi-direct method to measure the allowable pressure of soil to induce a given amount of settlement. So in foundation, what exactly we need to know is how much load, maximum bearing pressure which the soil can take, or the settlement related information. So plate load test is very useful to give you the information related to the bearing pressure and corresponding settlement. So this can be used as a model to the prototype foundation, as I mentioned. Okay. So what exactly you do in this plate load test is small plates like from 30 centimeter to 60 centimeter of thickness 2.5 centimeter are employed for the test, and then we apply. So this particular figure actually tells you the schematic view of the plate load test. This particular figure, as you can see here, you have a small plate. The plate dimension varies from 30 to 60 centimeters, and then we have jack which applies pressure on this plate. with some reaction frame or dead weight. So sometimes we use sandbags or sometimes concrete blocks if available for the dead weight. We can also anchor this with the ground if sufficient anchorage is available for the reaction. So what exactly happens is, using this jack, when you apply pressure to this plate, the plate exert pressure on the ground similar to your foundation. So as pressure is exerted on the ground, there will be some kind of deformation on the ground that has to be recorded with the corresponding load. So load corresponding to different deformation or settlement we can call as the ground settles. So load settlement curve we can get using this plate load test, and from this load settlement curve we can actually get the details for the foundation. So as I mentioned, the load is on the plate is applied by making use of hydraulic jack. The reaction of the jack load is taken by a cross beam or steel truss anchored suitably at both the ends. The settlement of the plate is measured by a set of 3 dial gauges of sensitivity 0.02 millimeter placed at 120 degree apart. So that means at 3 different corners you can put this dial gauges. The dial gauges are fixed to independent supports which do not get disturbed during the test. So dial gauges, the support for the dial gauges has to be from a independently and from a far distance, so that it does not get disturbed during the settlement of the soil. The other aspect is the dimension, like the peat dimension. You have to have a peat, and the peat should have a sufficient room for carry out the test. Okay. Usually it has to be more than 1.5 B. B is the thickness of the plate. Now a typical load settlement curve which we can get from this plate load test is looking like this. As you can see here, load per unit area, that is Q, and the settlement. So as the load increases, as we apply the load through the jack on the plate, your plate, the ground settles or ground deforms, so you will get a continuous curve like this. Okay. So that the load settlement curves varies with the type of soil. If it is sand, we will have a one type of load settlement curve. If it is clay, it will have another kind of thing. So as you can see, this load settlement curve for different type of soil. As you can see, for dense cohesionless soil, as you can see, you get a steep curve initially and then becomes flattened. Okay. Similarly, partially cohesive soil, it steep initially and then it goes. Similarly, for loose to medium cohesionless soil, less steeper, and then for cohesive soil, as you can see, it flattens faster. So it cannot take much load. So this different 4 type of different curves are actually giving you information, the load settlement information for various type of soil. Now you get the load settlement curve from the test by applying the pressure from the jack and measuring the settlement using dial gauges. So this information has to be interpreted properly to get the details for the foundation. The load settlement curve should be plotted first, and then allowable pressure of the prototype foundation for an assumed settlement has may be found out by making use of equation by Terzaghi and Peck. So you have load settlement curve, as you can see here, corresponding to a specific settlement. You can find out what is the maximum load. So if you restrict your settlement, that means for a foundation, as you know, there are 2 important criteria. One is the bearing pressure criteria, another is settlement criteria. So if you fix your settlement, the corresponding the load you can find out. So the equation given here is for the granular soil and the cohesive soil. As you can see here, for granular soil, if you see here, the SF is the footing width and the SP is the plate width. So there is a, from the plate you are actually trying to find out what will be the settlement corresponding to footing. So this ratio equal to BF bracket BP plus 30 divided by the BP BF plus 30. So F corresponding to footing, P corresponding to plate. That means from the plate you are trying to find out what is the settlement for the footing. So SF permissible settlement of foundation in millimeter, SP is the settlement of the plate in millimeter, and the size of the plate in meters, BP is the size of the plate in meters, it is 30 to 60 as I discussed, that's 60 centimeters, and then BF the size of the plate, footing, the size of the footing in meters. So with this equation you can find out what is the settlement for the footing, and then once you know the footing settlement you can find out the corresponding load. In case of cohesive soil, directly you can use this relationship, the ratio SF by SP, that is the footing divided by the plate and the width of the footing divided by the width of the plate. So that ratio can be used for the cohesive soil. For granular soil it is very useful, but for cohesive soil, as you can guess, this plate load test may not be very suitable, because it is the test has to be done in short duration, and then for clay soil where pore pressure dissipation takes time may not be suitable. So when that means when we are doing the plate load test we have to do it with caution. So there are some limitations, as I highlighted one, the foundation, sometimes foundation soil may be heterogeneous, and that case there will be a problem. For example, if the soil underlying the top soil is basically underlying soil is basically a weak soil, and in case of plate load test, because the smaller width of the plate, the bulb may not reach to that weaker zone. But in case of larger footing, the bulb will increase to a greater depth. In that case, the plate load test will give lower value of settlement, which is misleading. So as mentioned here, the foundations are larger than the test place. The settlement and the shear resistance of soil against shear failure will depend on the properties of much thicker stratum. So in plate load test, your concern zone is relatively smaller, but in case of footing, your zone of thickness will be very high, which will include any weaker strata if there. So you may miss that information in case of plate load test. Thus the results of test could be misleading if the character of the soil changes at shallow depth. As I already mentioned, the plate load test, being a short duration test, does not give the ultimate settlement, particularly in case of cohesive soil. So you have to be cautious while doing the test in cohesive soil. For clay soil, the bearing capacity for large foundation is almost same as that for the smaller test place. But in dense sandy soils, the bearing capacity increases with the size of the foundation, and hence the test with smaller size of plate tends to give conservative results. So obviously minimum dimension of the plate has to be used in case of plate load test, especially if it is done in dense sand. So hope you have understood the pressure meter test and the plate load test. Any question on this? Is there any disadvantage of SPT test? Yeah, SPT test, BMSC College. Okay, thank you for this question. As you know, the SPT, what exactly you have to do? You have to have a bore hole to the required depth, and you have to take out the drill bit and then replace that with the sampler. Okay, so in case you have to do the sampling or the SPT test at frequent depth, it will be really difficult to go about, because you have to change the sampler every time and then go do the test. So obviously it will be little difficult in case the strata changes very frequently. Okay. So this is one difficulty, and then there are some related corrections which are there, which overcomes some of the limitations. Okay. So this is one of the any specific limitations you are asking, then I will be happy to answer that. SCPT test gives a lot of subcell data in terms of cone resistance at friction. SCPT, that is seismic cone penetration test. As a name implies, it is a CPT with addition of seismic sensor, which gives you the shear wave velocity. So as far as popularity is concerned, because anyhow we do the CPT most of the cases, so if your CPT has the additional sensors, it will directly give the shear wave profile also. So especially for earthquake applications where you need the shear wave profile of the ground, this data will be very useful. Otherwise also we have various other techniques which gives the shear wave profile, like MASW techniques or other related techniques, which will give you the shear wave profile separately. So in case if you have a CPT data, not the SCPT, or even you have SPT data, we can supplement with some additional test to get the shear wave profile. Okay. So it's need not to do a CPT for site investigation in that case. So that's why many places people don't go, because of the sophistication involved, and then most of our contractor may not be comfortable with that kind of sophistication. But outside India, various places they go by this particular method, where they make the measurement completely automated. The other important test which is related to site investigation, especially to find out the shear strength characteristics. As I already mentioned, getting a undisturbed sample from cohesionless soil is little difficult. So a field test like vane shear test, which will be very useful to get a field shear value. So as the name implies, the vane shear, it is basically a vane attached with a probe or a rod. So once you rotate the rod after inserting the vane into the soil, you shear the soil with a specific amount of torque. So that the amount of torque required to shear the soil through this particular vane, as shown in the picture, is basically used to find out the shear strength of the soil, that is the undrained shear strength of the soil. So vane shear test can be used as a reliable in situ test for determining shear strength of soft sensitive clays. Why soft sensitive is, like especially clay, if it is soft, it is very difficult to get a undisturbed sample, and if it is sensitive, then also it's very, because the moment you touch that, you loses the shear strength, and then very difficult to take out the sample. So soft sensitive clays, it is always advisable to use vane shear test to get the shear strength value. So as mentioned, the vane shear test should be regarded as a method to be used under following conditions: where the clay is deep, normally consolidated and sensitive, where only the undrained shear strength is required. So as I mentioned, this vane shear test, you do the test quickly, and mostly it gives the undrained shear strength for quick sensitive clays. Even for underwater, it is very useful, as question is raised. So this vane shear test gives similar results that obtained from unconfined compression test on undisturbed samples. So it was found that this vane shear test, once you do, it is comparable with the UCS test on undisturbed sample. it is necessary that the soil mass should be in saturated condition if the vein test is to be applied. It has to be saturated, and test cannot be applied for partially saturated soil which the angle of shearing resistance is not 0. So what exactly you do here, as I mentioned, so you apply some turning moment to the veins of specific dimensions as the picture shows here. As you can see this particular, you apply some kind of torque or moment on this shaft which is attached with a vein which is inserted on the soil. So once you rotate this, these veins will exert pressure to the ground, the soil, and then try to shear it. Once it reaches the shear strength of the soil, it gets sheared and then it starts rotating freely. So the maximum torque at which the soil gets sheared is basically recorded, and through which the shear strength is found out. The turning moment applied to this to the torsion head above the ground is equal to the force multiplied by the eccentricity. So this is actually used for the calculation purpose. So if you see this particular picture where the vein is shown, as the torque is applied to this rod which subsequently rotates the vein, and then the corresponding shear strength is calculated. So here, as you can see here, the pressure distribution, the shear stress distribution is given here from the side of the veins and the top and bottom. So this top and bottom and the side will get a shear stress distribution while applying the torque. So the total shearing resistance of the soil at failure is calculated pi d HCU. H is the height of the veins, D is the diameter, as you can see here, and then Cu, that is the undrained shear strength. So that takes care of the sides. Then we have 2 into the integral 2 pi r dr. That means this part also there is shearing resistance multiplied by the undrained shear strength. So this gives the complete the side as well as upper and bottom and top and bottom all together is the value for total shearing resistance, where Cu is the unit undrained shearing resistance and R is the radius of the sheared surface. Now the moment of the total shear resistance about the center of the torque T at failure can be calculated as, so that means you are applying the torque, then you are calculating the moment, that is multiplied by the arm length d by 2. In this case you are multiplied by r. Okay. So the equation will reduce to T is equal to Cu 2 pi bracket d square h by 2 plus dq by 6. So this is the relationship with the torque and undrained shear strength, unit undrained shear strength. Now many times what exactly happens is you do this vein shear test on in some boreholes. In that case the upper part has to be, because there won't be any soil here, you just insert this part and there won't be any soil on the top. So that means this part has to be neglected. So in this case this will become d square by h2 plus dq by 12. Instead of 6 it will become 12. So if the test is carried out such that the top of the vein does not shear the soil, then the expression will reduce to this, or in general the expression is this one, which is T is equal to Cu pi bracket d square h by 2 plus dq by 6. So that means if we get the torque at failure, undrained shear strength Cu can be easily determined. Now what happens once you reach the failure? After that, again, if you go on rotating your vein, will after several times of rotation, the soil will get remolded. You will get the remolded strength, and from that remolded, we also can calculate the sensitivity. So you can find out the sensitivity of the soil. So as you know, the sensitivity is basically the ratio of the shear strength undrained cohesion at undisturbed soil sample and then the remolded sample. So that ratio will tell you what is the sensitivity of the clays. So there is number which actually tells you how sensitive your clay is. For sensitivity 1 means it is number, the ratio is 1 means it's insensitive. If it is more than 64, or this is extra quick. If it is 32 to 64, it's very quick. So like that, for different sensitivity ratio, you can find out how much the sensitivity is. So very sensitive clay are not good for the geotechnical design. So obviously you need to find out how much sensitive your site is, how much sensitive your soil is. So as you can guess, this particular test, the vein shear test is not very suitable for fibrous pits. Like we have lot of fibers, so that will hamper the rotation, free rotation. Then sands and gravels are there, or in clays containing laminations of silt or sand. So it will be difficult to perform a vein shear test in such soils. And this vein shear test results are influenced by various factors like the type of soil, then the strength anisotropy, the disturbance due to the insertion of the vein. So while inserting the vein, it may create some disturbance, rate of rotation, time lapse between insertion of the vein and beginning of the test, progressive failure of the soil around the vein. So these are some factors which influence the results of vein shear. So with this, I'll conclude the vein shear part. So we'll discuss the geophysical investigation. We'll continue with some tests which are part of geophysical investigation tomorrow, and then we'll have a continuous discussion session for very related questions. Okay. The other aspect related to once we finish all the tests, the last part is basically the geotechnical investigation report. Once you have all the investigation done, you have to part of this 4 components of geotechnical site investigation is basically the geo investigation report. So in this report, as you know, there will be various components. Like first you need to mention the scope, then we have the description, the structures, then the geological conditions, drainage facilities, details of boring. So various other related information has to be listed out, and then we also need some kind of maps and other related drawings like site location maps, location of boring information, boring logs, laboratory test results, other special informations. Okay. So your report should contain this at least this information like the geological condition, the drainage, the details of boring, description of the subsoil conditions, groundwater details, details of foundation, and then any specific anticipated problems, then the limitation of your investigation. So you do site investigation, but with some limitation as well. So that also need to be highlighted. A typical bore log will look like this. As you can see here, you have details of a particular project. Then we have boring number, what is the borehole number, type of boring. Okay. Then we have date. So we have description of soil, what kind of soil you actually are getting with the boring. So whether it is sandy, strata or clay, So that information has to be given. Then depth of the sample, at what depth you are getting what type of samples, so that corresponding depth has to be highlighted. And then if SPT test is being done, then the number of SPT, the corresponding number has to be highlighted at the particular depth where the SPT is being conducted. Then the related information, moisture content also can be highlighted. The other related information, Atterberg limit information also, like liquid plaster limit also can be given. So these are a typical bore log of a particular borehole. So we'll continue the next class with additional test with geophysical investigation. And for today, whatever questions is there related to today's discussion, today's lecture, you can ask. If you have any question, kindly ask. Or in case if you have a fibrous and peat kind of soil, you can take sample direct undisturbed samples from that kind of peat and try to do laboratory test instead of vein shear test. If you have to do, you have to get the shear strength characteristics. Obviously, you have to get an undisturbed sample from the site. So tomorrow we'll have the last session where we'll be discussing first the geophysical investigation. Then we'll discuss. We'll conclude with the various whatever we discussed, and then we can have a small quiz which is related to this particular module, and then we'll also have a question answer session. Okay, so we can ask your questions and discuss. PMT test, how larger depth modulus can measure? How large or to what depth? Am I right? Is it the question? To what depth you can get the modulus? Okay. So depends on your probe at what depth you can send. So it is that's the reason you actually do the pressure meter test. So depth restriction is actually ruled out. So we can go a very large depth, even 30-40 meters reasonably easily can be done. Okay. So thank you very much for your patience. We'll see you tomorrow again at the same time, and we'll discuss with the geophysical investigation with subsequently some question answer and a small quiz. Okay. Thank you very much. you.